Let's talk more about what Linda just talked about, the Manhattan DA's investigation into Neely's homicide. Here to break it down is Jeremy Saland. He's a former assistant prosecutor in the Manhattan DA's office. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining me. As you saw in Linda's live shot there and what she talked about, there's a lot of emotion in this case. And witnesses say that Neely was harassing other passengers on the subway. So what evidence would Alvin Bragg's office likely be looking at here in this case?
Well, to start things off, it's tragic no matter what happens. Anytime someone dies, it's a horrific event, and no one is deserving of death, harassment, or otherwise. The district attorney is going to have a big job in front of him because of all the emotion involved and because of what ultimately happened. But what does he need? He needs witnesses to identify what specifically happened. There's a video, but that's just a moment in time, and that doesn't reflect well for Mr. Penny, because Neely is not at that point really fighting back, if anything, but want to speak to witnesses. Is there anyone else who has a video? Are there 911 calls either at that moment, if there was reception, or shortly thereafter? Even from the platform where Neely got onto the subway car, what was happening? Because again, if someone is harassing another individual, that is not necessarily the imminent threat of danger that would justify a response.
Right. You know, of course, we don't know what will be presented if it goes to the grand jury. It's a secret proceeding. But what could be some of the charges here at play?
I would say not murder in the second degree. You'd be hard-pressed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt or even find reasonable cause to believe that Penny was acting intentionally. That was his actual objective and goal, to kill another person. I don't think that would pass the sniff test. That doesn't mean to sound so cavalier, but that's not what this is about. The real issue is whether or not this is manslaughter in the second degree, something that he was so reckless, or maybe criminally negligent homicide, which are lesser charges. They are not as significant as murders. They are felonies, but they're much less criminal offenses.
Do you think we could hear from Penny in all of this?
You know, it probably doesn't behoove him to say much.
Yeah.
Ultimately, he may have the opportunity, if she decides to exercise that, to testify in a grand jury and share what happened and whether or not Neely was that confrontational, and there was a real risk of imminent danger. Moreover, if he's so inclined, he and his attorney can speak with prosecutors outside the grand jury, explain what happened, learn a little bit about him. We call that a queen for a day, or a proffer agreement, which would protect him from those statements necessarily be used against him at a later proceeding.
So when we look at that video, we saw a couple other people too holding down Neely. Could they face any charges?
Could is a very open term.
Yeah.
I would expect not. I would expect that they're not rising to the level necessarily of accomplices. They weren't the ones who were using the chokehold. They weren't the ones holding Mr. Neely down around his neck for whatever period of time. So I wouldn't expect they'd be accomplices in the eyes of the law, though you better believe they are going to be witnesses that if they do not comply, they very well may be subpoenaed to a grand jury.
Okay, well, all right. Jeremy, thank you so much for breaking this down, and more to come too.